Hey everybody, welcome to the digital Disney world here on the mcmagic.us server. It is time for another episode of the Minecraft Disney Q&A. It's a series in which everybody asks me Q's about anything Disney related, and I give you A's, even if the A is I don't know. We're here at the Hollywood Studios on the server. We're going to do a little walking around, and I'm going to answer some Disney questions. So let's dive right in, why don't we? So the first up is from user Unification, who asks, "Hey Rob, do you think Disney may ever include attractions in their parks relating to Disney video games? One video game I would love to see in a Disney park is Kingdom Hearts. Being that it is also made by a different company, though, would there be any chance of seeing it in a Disney park?" So if you're unaware, Kingdom Hearts is a RPG by Square that contains both some of their original characters as well as a lot of Disney characters. In fact, it's a great game for Disney fans out there. Now, what are the odds of seeing it at a Disney park? What is this? Oh, they're maps. How clever. I think the odds are probably low, but I don't think there's anything inherently in its design that would prevent it from ever happening. So yes, Square does have a stake in the game, and so they don't own all the rights to everything. However, that's never prevented Disney from creating attractions before. You got to keep in mind, you have the Indiana Jones Stunt Spectacular, you have Star Tours, you have this upcoming Avatar Land. Hey, look at where we are. The Great Movie Ride contained a lot of intellectual property that Disney didn't own. Of course, now they own Lucasfilm, so they own Indiana Jones and Star Tours. But back when they were made, they didn't. They were just deals that they had made with those property owners. So it's not outside the realm of possibility that Disney would make a deal with somebody like Square to do an attraction based on Kingdom Hearts. I think the real question is, would they do that if they had the permission? And I don't know if they would. I feel like it would have to be much more popular of a product than it is currently for them to do that. Because you got to realize space is at a premium here, and it's a lot of work that goes into it, so it's got to be something big. I mean, Avatar is getting Avatar Land, which I've got my own mixed feelings about. But that was one of the, biggest grossing films of all time, things like that. Star Wars at the time was unbelievably, that guy's fast, was an unbelievably popular franchise. Still is, obviously. Same with Indiana Jones. So it's got to be something big, I think, to warrant the sort of time and energy and money it takes to make an attraction. And I don't know if Kingdom Hearts is totally there. I don't think any Disney video game is technically there yet. I think you might start seeing some stuff with that crocodile from Where's My Water, but I don't know. We'll see. I think it's oddly enough that iPhone game character is probably the best shot you've got. I think they already do character meet and greets with him, so he's already getting there. He exists in the parks, I believe. Here again in Hollywood Studios, I think that's where you can meet him. But great question. I definitely think, legally and logistically, it is totally possible. Rocky C2244 asks, "Can you tell me the history of downtown Disney in Orlando, and also what are your thoughts and opinions on it?" So it was essentially, the really short coffee table version is that it was part of Michael Eisner's campaign to extend the stay of a guest at Disney by creating more content for somebody to enjoy. And particularly, they were looking for something that guests could enjoy after the parks closed at night. And so a big part of downtown Disney in the early 90s and the late 90s too was something called Pleasure Island. And it was a little secluded island, I guess. It was connected by bridges, but it was one of those things where it was sort of like a little moat river. It didn't feel like an island, but it was an island full of different clubs, so like nightclubs and comedy clubs and dance clubs. And it was mainly, it was nothing too raunchy, but it was intended for adults and people over 18. And, it was like bars where you'd go drink. And it was sort of their attempt of making Disney like a cool place to go, not just for guests who were there, but people who lived in the Orlando area. The problem with it was they were not in the business of nightclubs, and so they didn't know how to manage them well. And any sort of area like that where it was just solely devoted to something like serving alcohol would sort of cause a lot of rowdiness, and there were a lot of fights that would break out there. And it wasn't the sort of thing where they were forced to shut down, but I think they got to the point where it just wasn't worth the trouble for them of keeping it up. So they eventually sort of shut that down, and it's sort of around where you see Planet Hollywood now. And I think it's one of those things where it was supposed to be a hub for, you know, adults to enjoy Disney after the parks closed, and it just slowly but surely became more and more family friendly, but yet remaining sort of a commercial center. You know, it wasn't something with a whole lot of attractions, although there are things like Cirque du Soleil and Disney Quest was in that area, which I think in itself was sort of like a failed experiment. I think it's cool. I like to visit it. You know, the strategy my friends and I take is that usually, because we use the Magical Express, which is the bus service to go to the airport, they pick you up, I think it's like 3 hours before your flight. So usually that means that on the day that we leave Disney, we can't really go to a park. If we were to go, we'd get like an hour or two in, which isn't a whole lot. So usually what we try to do is we reserve that last day when we're leaving to go to downtown Disney and buy anything last minute that we might have forgotten, and just shop around and hang out, and then just go back to get on our bus to go to the airport. I think it's a fun place. It's cool. I don't think it's one of those things you necessarily have to go to when you're in Disney, because like I said, it is very commercially oriented, and if you're not like big on buying merchandise, then there's not a whole lot there. I mean, yeah, there's a Planet Hollywood and a Rainforest Cafe and stuff like that, but nothing about it is so truly unique that you have to go. That's a good question. There's definitely, if you were to read Disney War, which covers sort of Michael Eisner's tenure at the Disney company, then you'd see a more in-depth history of sort of downtown Disney, Pleasure Island, things like that. Next question. East Coast Railroad Videos asks, would it be possible to build shuttle monorails, as in monorails that don't go on a loop but go to an end track piece, to big hotels that don't have monorails, like the All-Star Resorts? Great question. Would it be possible? Most likely. Probable? Probably not. That's one thing where I think it's going to boil down to cost. I'm obviously, I don't work for Disney. I don't have those numbers, so I can't tell you for sure. But I would wager that the cost of maintaining the bus service to hotels like that is far less than the cost it would take to excavate land and build the foundations and set up a monorail and then maintain that monorail. I think obviously the experience would be cooler. I love the monorail. If we could have a monorail to everything in Disney, that'd be fantastic. I especially say that as a New Yorker who, you know, uses the New York City subway system. If I could just get around the entire property via monorail, I'd be on cloud nine. However, thinking logically from a financial standpoint, it doesn't make the most sense. So probably not going to see it, especially because there are things you need to consider, like ground. The ground plays a big part of it, which seems weird, right? Because you wouldn't think that it would be such a hassle, but there have been a lot of Disney projects that were born and died on the fact that the ground wasn't suitable for construction. And something like the monorail, which is elevated on pylons, means that you need to have suitable terrain to build on. It's funny, the pylons that the monorail uses around the Seven Seas Lagoon are all different lengths, even though the track's level, because the terrain was so different around that entire property that they essentially just had to dig a hole until they hit, a sturdy enough piece of ground, and they filled a pylon with concrete. So in some cases it might have been 10 feet underground, and in other cases it could have been 50 to 60 feet underground. And it ended up being costly for that, but they were sort of committed and they had to do it. But it just sort of showed the sort of hassles that sort of come into play when you're building something like that. But like I said, I would love to see the monorail. I'm not a big fan of buses. I love trains and monorails, so please, Iger, if you're listening, go for it. Just listen, you've got the money, clearly. You just bought Star Wars. Just build the monorail. Cameron Benway asks, do you think River Country and Discovery Island will ever reopen? No, I don't. So River Country was a water park and Discovery Island was sort of a nature park, and they were both on the islands within the Seven Seas Lagoon in the middle. They were shut down different times, I think. I believe Discovery Island was shut down in the late 90s. I don't remember when River Country was. And they were shut down for various reasons with different theories behind it. I think the running belief with Discovery Island shutting down was because it was so nature focused, it sort of lost its uniqueness once the Animal Kingdom opened. So it just sort of didn't have as much of a purpose. And then River Country has a bunch of different myths and theories behind it. They range from just low attendance to the water of the Seven Seas Lagoon eroding part of the island to cases of deaths at Disney World due to an amoeba in the water there that was causing like this fatal brain failure or something like that. It's weird, and I don't think it was ever officially announced as the reason for the closing. But I think just the fact that people talk about it when talking about the history probably leads me to believe that they're never going to really do much with those islands. They just sort of sit there. They didn't even like break everything down. They just sort of left everything as is, and it's just fallen into a state of repair. And in general, if they were to do something with those islands, I don't think it would be in the form of River Country and Discovery Island. If you meant literally, will they reopen? I don't think so. I don't think Disney's ever in the business of revisiting old ideas in a literal sense. If anything, they'll just sort of take the essence of that and do something with it. But I don't really think so with that, especially because what was that, Aerosmith? Just because they've got so much space on the property that there's no need to really use those islands. I think back when they were first built in the 70s, this was before Epcot, before Hollywood Studios, before the Animal Kingdom, Disney World very much was sort of that Seven Seas Lagoon area. Not literally, but figuratively, that was the whole area. And so it made more sense back then to keep everything centralized. But now that we have this extensive bus system, we have the monorail system, I think you would see just them take any ideas and put them elsewhere. I feel like such a Debbie Downer. Like these past few questions are like, do you think this will happen? And my answer is always no. But unfortunately, there's the reality that they are a business at the end of the day. I feel like most of these ideas are really cool and I would love to see happen, but I just don't think they'll do it. And here's another one. The Brick Scoop asks, do you think... Here, let's go somewhere new. Let's go to Epcot. The Brick Scoop asks, do you think Disney will ever bring back 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, or at least a version of it? Again? Nope. I'm sorry, I don't. Maybe a version of it. Maybe possibly a version of it. Here's what they would do. If I think the only form that ride would ever come back is as a virtual reality type ride, similar to Star Tours or Body Wars. And I say that because the one thing that Disney really got out of shutting that ride down was real estate. That was a big attraction that used a lot of space up. And I don't think they would ever rebuild it just for the fact that they wouldn't spend a whole lot of space. I mean, take a look at rides today that are opening, attractions today. Things like Toy Story Midway Mania, Mission Space. Like, these are small, enclosed attractions. You don't see them really opening things like the Hollywood Studios backlot tour took up a lot of space. I don't think you'd see that today, something like that built. So I don't think in its traditional sense. I also think 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea isn't really relevant anymore. There are Disney historians and fans who will remember it for the ride and the movies and all of that. But today, you ask a kid what they think of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, they're going to tell you, I don't know what you're talking about. And it is about appealing to, a wide group. So I don't really think you'll see it. Sorry. Let's see. K-Op asks, I read Walt Disney never actually drew Mickey Mouse or several of the characters. True? True and false. He obviously has drawn Mickey Mouse before. He knows how. He created Mickey Mouse. He did draw comics when he was drawing comics for the papers, and I do believe he worked on a couple of like really short animated pieces. But if you mean he wasn't the main person who animated Mickey Mouse once the popularity grew, that is correct. That was Ub Iwerks, who was a famous animator who was like there with him for a really long time and was sort of the person there who did that. And I think that's great. It shows true talent. There's something, and I think this is something you could also relate to somebody like Steve Jobs or Bill Gates, which is it takes talent to be able to recognize what you can do and what you can't do, and what other people's can and cannot do, and to utilize that efficiently. He's somebody who, even though Mickey Mouse was his creation and his baby in a lot of ways, he was able to step back and go, look, I can't draw it nearly as good as it needs to be drawn. Somebody else should do it, and I'm better at things like story. He did work a lot extensively on the cartoons in terms of stories, so like he definitely had a hand in all of these Mickey Mouse animated bits. And he also for a long time did the voice of Mickey Mouse back when they first started adding sound to these cartoons. But no, he wasn't like really the main known person for animating Mickey, but he still created them. Let's see. The Champ 4427 asks, is it true that Disney used to have a runway at the Ticket and Transportation Center? And if there was, why did they get rid of it? So I tried to do some looking into this to clarify what I suspected from what I've read in books. So here's what I believe to be the case. And I might not be 100% positive on it, so if you know better history, feel free to let me know. But so Disney property did have a small runway early on for bringing in executives and important people back when they were planning and building Disney. And the ultimate goal at first was indeed to have a runway at Disney World, and people would then fly into Orlando and then hop a small plane over to Disney, or they would fly into somewhere else and hop a plane over to Disney. That ultimately ended up not being the case, obviously. I think this was a time period where, commercial flight was really exploding, and I think maybe they had this idea in their mind that in the future, today, people would be flying everywhere all the time. When we do fly a lot, obviously, but it's not as common as that, where families would pull in planes on Disney. So there is, I don't know, there could still be one there today for executive use or emergencies or stuff like that. But if so, it's very small. It's not used by the public. But that was in their plans at some point in time. That was sort of the ideas. I think also maybe they didn't have an idea of the scope. Like a small runway with smaller planes, I don't think that would work today, because think about how many millions of people come to Florida today just to go to Disney World, or how cars would change. I think that was looked at a time as a great alternative to driving, because driving was a hassle. But now today we've got these luxury cars that make it so much better of an experience, so that people can drive in, they could fly in. And there are just more efficient ways to do it. For instance, the Magical Express that comes, and it's a bus service that'll pick you up from the airport and take you back to the airport at the end of your trip. Probably much more cost efficient than running flights from Orlando International on a regular basis. But then again, back then, I don't think until we hit the oil crisis did we really consider the effects of so much use of fossil fuels would have on things like the environment, but also economically. I don't think, they saw how today just economically that makes zero sense for a company. And then finally this week, we have a little conflicting opinion. The Disney expert 408 says, okay, bear with me here. I have two questions. Number one, you said that Mission Space was basically, hey, let's warp there for this. They've actually got the park. There's no warp space? Warp. We'll just go to warp universe of energy. We'll walk over. First, you said Mission Space was basically a waste of space and it was intellectually empty. That's my favorite ride in Epcot. And besides, it took 5 years of research and collaboration with NASA to get the work done. It also gives people a look at what astronauts get to do. So honestly, I want to know what your opinion is on that. And I believe that the Disneyland Matterhorn and Disney World Space Mountain cars are identical. What do you think? So first off, I checked on Google Images. The Matterhorn cars and the Space Mountain cars are not identical. They are very similar in style in that they are 3 people, 1 across. So in that way, they look very similar. They've got rounded noses, things like that. But down to, I wouldn't, identical, no. They do have some looks, and the theming is a little different, so that would explain that. But to your other question, so I'm definitely not knocking people. I know people enjoy Mission Space. I can see why. I mean, it's not a bad ride. I just don't think it does Horizons justice. Yes, it does show what an astronaut gets to do, but I think the specifics of what they get to do, or what's shown of what they get to do, isn't very exciting. Because let's break it down. What is the ride? Literally, when you get on it, what are you seeing? You experience the launch of a rocket, and then it goes into space, and then it sets up this cryogenic sleep. And then it wakes you up when you get to Mars, and then it's this rocky landing, and then that's it. That's the ride. It's a takeoff and a landing. Theoretically, that has really nothing to do with Mars. It could be a takeoff and landing anywhere. Now, yeah, they worked with NASA for a lot of years, but I would wager even, that most of that was collaboration on the technology of the spinning, the centrifuge, I think it's the centrifuge machine, which is essentially what NASA uses to train astronauts who are going to experience high G-force pressure, which is sort of what you feel to create the effect of the launch. In that case, yes, it is very similar to what the astronauts go through. But let's take a look at Horizons now. What was Horizons about? I keep coming back here because I think this is very important, because I think this, more than the ride itself, embodies Horizons, which is, it is a peek into what life in space might be for humanity. And that's what Horizons was all about. Horizons wasn't about the exciting submarine trip down to the Sea Castle community. It wasn't about the rocket launch up to Brava Centauri. Or it wasn't like the speed rails out to the desert, Mesa Verde. It was about what was life once you got there. And it wasn't the most exciting in the sense that, it wasn't a thrilling, exciting trip. But the exciting part was that it was a logical, or, a mostly logical look at what life would be like if you were to live underwater or in space or in the desert. And Mission Space doesn't do that. I would be more willing to enjoy Mission Space if Mission Space wasn't about getting to Mars, but it was about living on Mars. I know what a rocket ship launch is like. I've seen them on TV. I know about G-forces. I've actually been in one of those spinning machines at Space Camp. But that's not what's exciting to me. The exciting part to me is once you get there, what do you do? How do you live on Mars? How do we as a species colonize Mars? And I think that's something that the ride could have answered but didn't. And that's why it's really not my favorite ride, and a ride that I guess I'm a little bitter about, because I did love Horizons so very much. And I have fond memories of Horizons. And now that it's gone and it was replaced with something I think that's more physically thrilling instead of intellectually thrilling, I sort of have a chip on my shoulder. It's not beyond saving. I think it's just a matter of, shifting the focus. Mars is definitely something we need to focus on. It's where I think mankind is going to turn to next when it comes to exploration. So we definitely should have a Mars attraction, but I don't think this is the aspect of Mars that's going to benefit anybody. So yeah, that's my thoughts. In any case, oh man, we're going back. This has been Minecraft Disney's Q&A. If you have a question for me, anything Disney related, the parks, the history, the company, the movies, all that stuff, I definitely love answering these questions. I try to get to as many as I can. In the event that I can't, I always try to get into the comments, so I do my best to answer every question. And I think on the worst case, if there's a question I don't answer, it's usually because it's already been asked a couple of different times and answered a few different times. But yeah, also, if you're watching this as it comes out, this is the last day that this video series will be out on a Wednesday. Going forward, they will premiere on Sundays at noon Eastern Standard Time. So do not come checking for this on Wednesday. I mean, I guess you'll still see one on Wednesday, but it will have already been out for a couple of days because Sunday is the next episode. In any case, have a fantastic week. Whatever you're doing, make the most of it because it makes it that much more fun and enjoyable. And I hope to see you all here next week for the next episode of Minecraft Disney's Q&A. Bye, everyone.